Hello, students. Today I am going to discuss about general safety and precautions that has to be taken while working in laboratory. We all know that laboratory is a place where the students, researchers, teachers interested in doing practicals and researches go and carry out experiments for getting desired results. But before it should be clear in mind that laboratories should be well set up and established. The students must know when they are working in a laboratory for what purposes the instruments are there, how to handle them, what is the functioning of instruments, what are different solutions and stents, and how should they work, how should students enter in the laboratory. These are some important points that a researcher has to consider. So, let us start the points which have been covered in the topic general safety and precautions. Well, the topics which have been covered is introduction, then safety rules, precautions, summary, and references. Introduction. Working with a variety of chemicals, instruments, and desired organisms, there exists chances of mishap, infection, injury, leading to hazards and unsuccessful failure of experiments. For experimentation in biological laboratory, the laboratory should be well set up and established, as I have already told you earlier. And before going to carry out experiments, the researcher must do the basic preparations and learn the methods for successful performance of experiments with prior planning, clarity, approach, protocols. The researcher must follow general safety rules and precautions carefully. Now, about safety rules. There are various safety rules which must be followed in the laboratory, and they are listed below. Number one, a clean apron, mask, safety glasses, and hand gloves must be used before entering in the laboratory to protect from microbial contamination and hazards. Number two, nails should be cut on regular intervals and long hairs should be tied back. Number 3, working bench should be kept clean with ethanol 70% or phenol 1 is to 100 and tidy. Number 4, hands should be washed by soap in running tap water before and after the work. 5. Spitting and smoking are prohibited in the laboratory. 6. Unnecessary activities like talking, eating, or touching face, ear, nose, eyes should be avoided. 7. Do not mishandle chemical solutions, stains, spirit lamps, ultraviolet lights, instruments, apparatuses, and electricity. Keep burner at a distance from organic solvents and it should be turned off soon after the use. Then, while working with microorganisms, aseptic condition should be maintained. Then, flame sterilized inoculation needle loop should be used. Then, do not open the culture tube plates directly and never inhale them nor observe with naked eyes. Also, do not suck the suspension with mouth while working with broth culture. Always use pipette sucker or autopipette. Keep labels of the culture with name, code, and date of work for recording purpose. All plates should be kept in tires and culture tubes should be kept in basket or racks in upright position. All cultures are to be incubated at desired temperature by transferring them in incubator. All stems, reagents, and stock cultures should be kept at their respective places after use. Steam sterilization of slides, pipette, culture tubes, plates should be done before washing. Faced with any difficulty, concerned staff or teacher should be contacted. So, all these are safety rules and now precautions. Number 1, disposal of laboratory wastage and culture after proper treatment. Number 2, precautions with autoclave. Number 3, precautions with incubator. Number 4, precaution with pH meter. Now, number 1, disposal of laboratory wastage and cultures after proper treatment. Untreated laboratory wastage and cultures should be disposed of after proper treatment. And the treatment is necessary due to reasons, that is, number 1, if it contains pathogenic microorganisms, the disease may transmit to healthy persons. And secondly, it may contaminate soil, water, causing water pollution. Some of the materials, such as cotton plugs, paper, napkins, swabs, should be autoclaved first and then is allowed to incinerate. But the microbial contamination containing material should be treated with some by adding disinfectant and thereafter autoclaved by putting them in a suitable container. The molten material should be discarded. Sometimes HCl is also added to hydrolyze the agar if present in the medium. This is added before autoclaving. The resistant forms, such as bacterial spores, should be autoclaved twice to kill them before their safe disposal. Now, precautions with autoclave. The level of water should be checked before operation. The air should be completely evacuated and the steam must have access to the materials to be sterilized. The cotton or glass beds must be sterilized in a glass container closed with foil. The heat sensitizer substances should not be sterilized by autoclaving, and it is important to mention that nowadays checking of complete autoclaving is possible by using strips that contain red solution which turns green at 115 degrees C if kept for 25 minutes. Then precautions with incubator. The door of the incubator should be opened only when required. If the tubes are to be incubated for a long time or at higher temperature, the medium may become too dry due to excessive evaporation. In such cases, cotton plug should be pushed inside the neck of the tube. The tube should be covered by a rubber cap so as to cover the plug. If the petri dishes are to be incubated for a long time, it should be placed in moist chamber with a damp sterile cotton wool at the bottom. Then precautions with pH meter. A pH meter should be handled carefully so that its electrode may not be broken. The electrode should always be kept inside distilled water so that electrode may not be non-functional. The acid should be handled carefully. Care should be taken that stains or acids must not contact with the skin. Stains should not be allowed to boil because Overheating of root tips would damage the chromosomes. While performing experiment in relation to isolation of genomic DNA, EDTA, NaCl, CTAB, tris, HCl and ammonium acetate should be autoclaved. All glassware should also be autoclaved. Chloroform, isoamyl alcohol 24 is to 1 should be freshly prepared and stored in a dark bottle. In the laboratory, there are several other instruments, say for example, colorimetry, that is a colorimeter, centrifuge, a spectrophotometer, laminar airflow, respirometer, and so on and so forth. To discuss about a few as regards precautions, I mention here a few. Now, precautions using colorimeter and carrying out colorimetry estimation. Never put wet tubes in colorimeter. Chromophobes exhibit a complementary color to that it absorbs. Therefore, it should be estimated at appropriate region of a spectrum which it absorbs maximally. Make sure the cuvettes are clean and fill cuvettes 2/3 full or to the top of the triangular mark, and always use the same cuvette for the blank solution and the other one for the sample. If the instrument will not be used for a long time, the battery should be removed and the instrument should not be used in high humidity environment. Then, precautions with centrifuge. It is a piece of equipment that puts an object in rotation around a fixed axis, applying a force perpendicular to the axis of a spin that can be very strong. And it is used for separation of fluids, gas or liquid based on density, and separation is achieved by spinning a vessel. Now, use of safety cups whenever possible. Disinfect weekly after all spills or breakages. Lubricate zero rings and rotor threads weekly, and do not operate the centrifuge without the rotor properly balanced. To sum up, before starting, the rotor and lid locking mechanism is to be checked, and materials such as viruses, bacteria, and toxic chemicals need to be placed in biotubes with special airtight caps to prevent the development of aerosol formation. Now, about balancing the load, make sure that all samples have the same weight and are placed in a balancing pattern. A small difference can make a large impact at high speed. Now, about chromatography. Pencil should be used. The ink stain can move up off the chromatography paper and there may be error. Before placing the chromatography paper in the solvent, it must be dry. Make sure the paper is dipped in the solvent. Chromatography is a separation technique mainly used to separate mixtures. Now, about a spectrophotometer. It is an analytical instrument used to measure the transmission or reflection of visible light, ultraviolet light, or infrared light. Now, about precautions with a spectrophotometer. Allowing the lamps and electronics to warm up, using the correct wavelength, and wiping fingerprints and a spilled sample of the outside of the cuvette before measuring should be observed. Now, summary. A laboratory is a place for working with a variety of chemicals, instruments, organisms to experiment with a variety of organisms for desired results. There are many techniques and instruments which have been developed by biologists to exploit the living cells and produce valuable results products. Familiarity with laboratory chemicals, instruments not only facilitates good working but also keep us safe from any sort of hazards, and therefore all above mentioned safety guidelines and precautions should be followed. In addition to this, there are other several safety rules. For example, emergency exit routes should be known. Location of laboratory safety showers, fire extinguishers. Then do not pour chemicals down drains. Do not utilize sewer for chemical waste disposal. Avoid working alone in the laboratory building if the procedures being conducted are hazardous. Laboratory employees should have access to a chemical inventory list, and there must be a departmental laboratory safety manual and access to laboratories and support areas such as stock rooms, specialized laboratories should be limited to approved personnel only. Therefore, appropriate safety precautions before beginning any work should be observed, and all laboratory personnel should place emphasis on safety and chemical hygiene at all times. If you have any questions and concerns about safety and you need assistance with operation of instruments, you can contact your teacher concerned. Thank you. Then references. I would also like to mention the references that I have gone through while preparing this lecture. Wikipedia and then a textbook of biotechnology by Dr. R. C. Dubey. Thank you.